So first of all, thanks very much to everyone who is participating to this meeting that is currently being recorded. This meeting is about how the COVID-19 epidemic influenced women's world of work. And today we have a great group of early scholars that are going to discuss what are actually the implications of the COVID-19 when it comes to the world of work, and when it comes to the world of women. And we're gonna hear from different perspectives. There's also different national perspectives involved and different legal traditions, and this is, I think, very exciting. Of course, we all know that the epidemic has had enormous impact on the world of work, and we are still just seeing the beginning of it, and where this will bring us, it's impossible to foresee at the moment. But for sure, what we already see is that the work of women and the life of women has been particularly impacted by the epidemic, because first of all, there's a disproportionate amount of women that execute paid or unpaid care work, and of course the pandemic has had a huge implication on this. Work executed in the household is still predominantly being executed by women, and so even when people are allowed to work from their home, women suffer the biggest of the brunt out of it, because they are expected to work from remote, but also they contribute to most of the chores executed in the domestic household. And also people that work outside the household, because we shouldn't forget that a lot of people are essential workers that work outside, and they are not allowed to work for remote. It is possible for them to work for remote. Workers have to face the fact that many services that we normally give for granted, and particularly, for instance, childcare, schools, kindergartens, are closed or were restrained to the pandemic. So this also has had a huge impact. So we're gonna hear more about these and many other topics. I would like to, without further ado, start the discussion. Before we start, just a couple of technical things. First of all, if you could possibly switch your mic off if you're not talking, so that the audio is better for everyone. And also, at the end of the 4 presentations, we are going to have a general discussion, so you're all warmly invited to contribute with questions to the discussions. If you could write your questions in the chat that should be available for everyone, it will be easier for us to direct the questions to one of the speakers or to all of our speakers. Having said that, again, I want to thank all of the 4 speakers who also are the members of the organizing committee of this initiative for organizing this initiative. And I would like to start giving the floor to Maria Cristina De Goli. Maria Cristina works at the moment at the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. She also works as a lecturer in the University of Modern and Reggio Emilia. In the past, she has held position at the University of St. Gallen and the University of Paris-Nanterre. Maria Cristina, thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give me 30 seconds to thank my colleagues that have been very generous in doing efforts and try to make altogether this possible. So this event has been possible thanks of them and our cooperation. So thank you very much. I would like to start giving you some numbers related to the pandemic situation, related to the impact of the pandemic on the labor market, and of course, give you a perspective from the social security. So I know that we are researchers in law, so we don't use numbers so often, beside the fact that we can use articles and legislation. But I think that sometimes numbers are very useful in sizing the situation, so sizing the impact that we are experiencing now concerning the gender issue in the labor market. So I will start with an international perspective, so give you some numbers from an international perspective, and then move on the Italian situation, and underline that this number are very significant for me, or in my opinion. So let's start with the work of female workers. So, for example, I would like to underline the fact that a quarter of the world GDP is represented by the women unexpressed economical potential in the market. So it's a huge number. For example, if we take into consideration all the types of women care work, including the unpaid, we are speaking about 11 trillion US dollar in global. So it's a very important economic impact on the labor market in general, the economic market in general. 60% of workers that work in the informal economy are women, and 70% of essential workers and first-hand workers are women, engaged in the front line, and with an enormous personal sacrifice they have fought against the Covid-19. And I don't want to go farther on this topic because my colleague Andrea Franconi will be great about this. From a national perspective, in Italy, there are two reports that we can consider the Italian situation. And for example, the first one is from the Italian institution who deals with the accidents at work. And it has shown that on 10 cases of workers, 7 of them that have been infected by the virus are women. So underline the fact that more women are working in the very high risky category of jobs. Also for this, and it support also the previous statement about the frontline workers and the impact of women in this fight to COVID-19. Female workers so represent just 30% of workers involved in low-risk jobs. In the medium risk, we can find 50% of female workers, and as I told before, the 70% in the high-risk sector. In addition, I'd like to stress that women have been the first workers that they start working from home, or this remote work. And this choice has been drove by the problem concerning childhood care and also elder care, because in families, unfortunately, there's no a very balance or right balance between childcare and elderly care. A survey that is being conducted, another survey that is conducted by employment consultants, shown that on a group of 100 female workers with at least one child that is aged no more than 15 years old, on this group, 74 has declared that they have worked without a break, because they have just shifted from the activities that they have to do, to deal with their business, or because they are employees. They shift just from the professional work to the family work. So 74 of them declare that they have worked without any break. With regard of unemployment, These data are not from a national perspective, but from a regional perspective, and I have to stress that regions that gave the numbers are the most productive regions in Italy. So we are speaking about Lombardy, Emilia-Romagna, and also Lazio. Among these requests for unemployment benefits, the 60% on average has been presented by female workers. So the majority has been presented by female workers. And just the last number, and then I will go further. If we think about the resignation that new parents have presented, not only due to the pandemic crisis, but in general in the labor market, a survey has shown that in 2019, 1,400 parents resigned from their job due to childcare. And this data came from Lombardy, so came from one of the most economic regions in Italy. And among them, 1,051, so 73% were women. And I think the data that has the most impact is that 800 are aged between 29 and 44. So we can say the very active group of workers. So the cohort related to the age is very productive as a worker in general. So the fact that, for example, these data show that maternity is still an issue, despite the fact that maternity is protected by the legislation. But this is still an issue concerning the balance in family duties, and for this reason, and this is the principal reason to push away women from the labor market. From an Italian perspective, what has been done in Italy during the pandemic crisis? Honestly, I have to say that something has been done in terms of employment and social security legislation, because from a social security perspective, parents have the right to ask for more than 30 days as parental leave, and in certain cases, so when parents have children that they are aged less than 12 years old, they have the chance to obtain the 50% on average related to their salary, and they have the chance to obtain also contribution for this period. And I will stress this because contribution in a country as Italy, where the social security entitlements are linked very tight with the professional career, is very important to have a certain amount of contribution to have the access of the protection entitlements. If not, you are outside the system, the social security system. So in this case, the government has given the right to obtain these 30 days more concerning the parental leaves. Parents of children that are aged 12, 16, they have the only right to obtain this leave, but without any payment, so neither salary nor contribution. And in a perspective, from a social security perspective, the contribution problem is very dangerous. Or let me explain better. If we think, for example, at a professional career that has not interruption concerning jobs, you can have the right to obtain social security entitlements related to your career, to your activities. Instead, and I have to say that women are in this situation, the delay in entering the market, at the same time the interruption between a job to another one will be very, very dangerous to them. Not only for the fact that they are not able to reach the minimum threshold of contribution to obtain the social security protection, but also if we think about the future of these women, they will not be able to collect enough contribution to obtain pension entitlements. So, and also when we speak about women workers, we have to stress the fact that their salary or the contribution that they give to the economic market is very important, also to avoid that in the future his family will be faced with poverty. So they will be in a poverty risk. And as you know very well, employment and social security are two faces of the same coin. So what happened in the labor market will have an impact on the social security. So as many as possible to help in stabilizing or protecting women worker, the better will be also from a social security perspective. And let me conclude with some ideas, some input that I have to say that the government is taking into consideration to prepare a new legislation based on the principle to support parenthood, to support the working life balance regarding women workers. I'd say that the idea that are described in this draft of legislation, they are very good in terms of principle and ideas itself, but they would like to, or the government would like to link the operation or the implementation of this measure with a limited budget. And I think that is a crucial issue, because as it has been during the pandemic, workers have the right to obtain the payment, for example, the salary related to the parental leave and the contribution, but only if the budget was available at the time of the request. And in this way, it is not possible to cover all the requests concerning that parental leave, for example. So new measures are are foreseen to support and to boost the balance, of course, the balance in families. So, for example, the new measure will allow fathers to be more active in families, having a longer parental leave, or a parental leave that is devoted only to men, so only to male parents. But in my opinion, the limited budget could be compromised, the entire action, because we cannot complain, or from an Italian perspective, but also from a European perspective, due to the directives that are against against gender discrimination, etc. There are many legislation that can support the women activities, although is not in reality we have to face with problems related to the society, and the fact that it's very hard to bypass these gender definition of duties in families and in other activities, and go behind and realize a very balanced labor market. So I would thank you again for having me in this event and be part of this event, and I will leave the floor to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks, Maria Cristina. You're getting a virtual round of applause. Thanks also for sticking so very well to the time. And now it's the turn of Dr. Andrea Franconi, who is an assistant professor at the University of Buenos Aires. She has an extensive experience in international and comparative labor law. She also has an LLM from the Utrecht University and participated in negotiations of several ILO instruments in the past. Please, Andrea, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Valerio. So first, I would like to thank everyone for joining us in this space and in this event, also for generating a space for thought on these issues that widely affect the world of women work. And of course, to my female colleagues here for sharing their research with us. So for this event, I asked myself about women fighting COVID, the feminization of the response, the reinforcement of gender gaps. Well, we all know that COVID-19 has changed the way we live. It has deepened pre-existing inequalities in different areas of our work and exposed cracks in social, political, and economic systems, including access to health services and social protection. Women with care responsibilities, informal workers, low-income families, and youth are under particular pressure on this. So my research is focusing on what are some of the unique risks that women must manage in the face of COVID-19. First, I found out that women play a disproportionate role in disease response, as Maria Cristina mentioned before. She already mentioned, I will just repeat this. This is according to UN Women reports. Women make up to 70% of health workers on the front lines. That's an estimated of 166.8 million of women. So this means that women are currently at the front lines, providing essential medical and other services and keeping communities running while lockdowns are enforced. As a result, they face tremendous increase in their working hours and a greater risk of being directly exposed to COVID-19. The health and social rights and the crisis that is brought about by the pandemic has shown the essential but yet economically underestimated value of the services that are provided by women workers as part of the health and social systems, in emergency services, and especially in care services. Statistics show that over 60% of women in the front lines are, on one side, underpaid, given the pre-existing gender wage gaps that are approximately of 27%. Also, the high percent of women represented in the informal sector of the economy, as well as in the informal jobs of the formal sector. And the effect of the horizontal labor segregation that is related with the social phenomenon called feminization of certain jobs and occupations, and of course, its consequence, which is the persistent tendency of lower salaries in those activities and occupations where women predominate. On the other side, we can look that women are overworked. The outbreak has exposed and enhanced long-distance standing gender inequalities. All health and social care workers, we know that they are all facing these exceptional demands throughout the crisis, but the strain is likely to be particularly acute for women care workers. Furthermore, 100 million female workers in healthcare and institutions around the world. Balancing work and family responsibilities has always been a challenge, we know this. So the cultural construction of gender has imposed certain roles to women and girls within the family, such as caring for children and other dependent family members, as well as providing for basic needs of the family life, such as domestic work, food, hygiene, and education for children. But this burden is now heavier on them because they have to fulfill this role with a significant increase in the care needs of children, elderly, and of course the sick, as well as the threat of food insecurity. This is even more burdensome for some women working in essential services and women single heads of households. Before COVID-19 crisis, according to the ILO, 16.5 million hours were spent in an unpaid care work every day across the world, and from those, over 2/3 were performed by women. During this pandemic, many women have seen the hours they devote to unpaid care work increase as a consequence of school and daycare closures, reductions in public increase as a consequence of people trying to overcome this crisis and try to avoid the overexpenditure of public services on these areas, the non-ability of domestic workers, and the need to look after family members with COVID-19. As a result of the pandemic, women are facing a double burden, longer shifts at work and additional care work at home. Despite the increased burden, their unpaid care work continues to be undervalued and unrecognized without any means to ensure its fair distribution and alleviation through the expansion of social protection, as Christina mentioned as well. Plus, many care workers are either choosing or are required to isolate when out of work to minimize the possible passing of the infection to family members. In these circumstances, it is likely to be difficult, if not impossible, for many women health and social care workers to fulfill both their personal and professional responsibilities. So I want to attend another issue on this regard, which is the labor conditions of the workers in the front lines. A main part of the response to the crisis that COVID-19 has imposed upon us are care jobs. Care jobs are often characterized by temporary or 0 hours contracts, low salaries, work overload, and long hours. The care pay penalty is more pronounced for women, in particular in occupations in which they predominate, such as nursing. During the current pandemic, the working conditions of health workers, in particular those dealing with COVID-19 patients, have dramatically deteriorated. Extremely long working hours in intensive care units, insufficient personal protection equipment, understaffed and resource constraints environments come on top of intense emotional stress, exposing women health workers even more to higher risk of infections and transmissions. At the same time, their forced isolation away from home, as I mentioned before, has generated further stress, in particular for single mothers. And this brings me to another issue that they must face. Even before the pandemic, healthcare workers were reported very high levels of violence and harassment compared to other industries. During the negotiations of Convention 190 and Recommendation 206 from the ILO, the workers' groups remarked the high levels of exposure to violence and harassment that women health workers experience, and therefore health was included in Recommendation 206 as one of the sectors and occupations in which exposure to violence and harassment may be more likely. With COVID-19, women workers' exposure to discrimination, stigma, violence, and harassment has increased effectively. And in many countries, incidents have been reported of chlorine being thrown at nurses commuting to and from work, or of health personnel being evicted from their apartment or ostracized by their neighbors. Insufficient staff and facilities is another important stress factor for both patients and health workers, and increases the risk that the latter will be exposed to violent behavior by patients, by their families, colleagues, or managers. In the absence of gender-sensitive intersectional responses, different forms of systemic discriminations already faced by women and girls are exacerbated. The COVID-19 pandemic is exacerbating the long-standing problem of gender inequality in workplaces and in the labor market, with women experiencing even higher levels of job insecurity and discrimination, according to Amnesty International finds. Just to close up, I would like to point out something that the ILO General Director Ryder said. He said that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown the always essential role of the working heroes of this pandemic, which is people who are usually invisible, unconsidered, undervalued, even ignored. Health and care workers, cleaners, supermarket cashiers, unpaid carers in their homes and communities, and of course, a large majority of women, frequently women migrant workers. UN Women Executive Director said also that the pandemic has caused a crisis reaching far beyond health, challenging fundamental aspects of the ways in which we have previously arranged our social and economic structures. Women earn less, save less, hold less, secure jobs, and are more likely to be employed in the informal economy, with less access, of course, to social protection, as also mentioned Christina this. In order to fully comprehend the gender impact of the crisis, it is crucial to understand the structural discrimination underlying this emergency, which is not only causing but exacerbating serious violations of women's and girls' human rights. Women are also at the forefront of the battle against the pandemic, while they are underrepresented in leadership and decision-making processes in the healthcare sector. Moreover, gender inequalities across many dimensions persist and engage. The adoption of a gender-sensitive intersectional approach in the responses to COVID-19 becomes then fundamental to overcome this crisis, recognizing the relevance of the treatment of these particular issues in order to guarantee a new, a better, but especially a more equal women's work of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrea. In your case, also for sticking very closely to the timing, and also, of course, for the contents of your presentation. It was excellent. Thank you so much, and I am sure we will have a lot of questions and follow-up from our audience on both the presentations that we just heard. And now I'm giving the floor to Seren Kasim. Seren is a doctoral candidate from the University of Göttingen. She has completed a bachelor degree in the law faculty of Ankara, and then she qualified as an attorney at law and received an LLM degree from Humboldt University in Berlin. She also the recipient of various awards and scholarship, and her research interests include human rights, labor law, anti-discrimination law, and comparative law. Her current research, the doctoral research, is actually on the relationship between non-discrimination law and dismissal protection. Seren, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor De Stefano. Can you hear me, to be sure? Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, my colleagues, Maria Cristina De Goli and Franconi. I would like to start to address, I want to address my topic first in a general tendencies, what is coming, and I want to look at them in a theoretical way. Then I would like to address 3 problems which I see important, which I see from also important, my colleagues think also the same way, women in the informal economy first, and second, violence against women, and the third, home office and the women, which also leads very well to Professor Novowitz's last presentation after my presentation. So let me start. I want to make it clear how I understand this situation, first of all. In my opinion, the inequalities we see during this COVID-19 period is not something very new, actually. The crisis the pandemic caused actually highlighted the inequalities we have in our societies, and it exacerbated them. Let's have a look who suffered most, which group of people affected most from COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions and regulations. The ones who have already been disadvantaged in the society suffered most. Migrants, racial, ethnic minorities, and oppressed groups, and women, as we already know. And women who are in the most affected sectors, women who have less or no access to social protection, women in the informal economy, women who have the childcare responsibilities, mothers, especially single mothers. We have been dealing with the discrimination in our society for a long time. The people are discriminated because of their gender, because of their race, because of their minorities, because of their personal qualities and their group identities. And the important thing is, these discriminations intersect each other in many cases, which COVID-19 showed us very clearly. But this intersection is not something 1 + 1 is 2 and this person is discriminated twice more than the other one, but it comes to 1 + 1, at least 3 to 5 or something. Take a look, refugee women in a camp or migrant domestic worker, or Black women in a white dominated society. We have been, as lawyers and as theologians about this situation, we have been dealing discrimination when we take it generally in 3 ways, in 3 approaches. First we have the dignity approach, which is very important, which is especially the ground of all us being equal human beings, very precious. We have equal opportunities approach, which gives us the opportunity to have the same opportunity from the society, everything. Anyway, but what we have seen in the COVID-19 crisis, these 2 approaches are not enough to, are not well equipped to answer the problems emerging from the identities, human identities, and especially the intersectional discrimination. I think we need to find a new way, or we have to make the ways which we have already effective. So at this point, I want to go to my examples. First, I want to come to the women in the informal economy, which already Maria Cristina De Goli mentioned about it. As we know, ILO reported COVID-19 had led to a reduction in hours worked of 10% worldwide, which means 305 million jobs lost, and economies are decreasing, and the number of unemployed as well as the number of working poor will highly increase. COVID-19 crisis and the strict protection measures affects especially people living in extreme poverty. For some, going to work means being under high health risks. Either they work and exposed to disease, or they don't work and face hunger. It's not only about making a living, it's about existence, especially workers in the informal economy. Think about waste pickers, paper collectors, street vendors, domestic workers, and all of them. And 6 out of 10 people in the world making their living from the informal economy. And there is because the average income in the informal economy shrank by 60%, in the informal economy, 60% in the first month of the crisis. It's unbelievable. And according to data from Turkey, the overall informal employment rate in informal economy is 32%. For women, it is 41%. While informality in urban areas 21%, rate decreases to 20 for men and increases to 25 for women. unfortunately, no specific measures were taken by the presidential government regarding the problems of the informal workers in the informal economy. Some municipalities did something, but they are not nationwide, they are not valid in the nationwide. So we can say that this 41% of women have been forgotten by the government. This leads me to my second point, violence against women. This is a very delicate topic, so I mean, it's hard to speak about it, but we have to. Globally, even before the COVID-19 pandemic began, 1 in 3 women experienced physical or sexual violence, mostly by an intimate partner. In Europe, as many as 43% women have experienced psychological abuse, and 22% of women have experienced physical or sexual abuse from intimate partner. Violence affects people's psychological, physical health and dignity and everything, and also their place in the world of work. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, all types of violence against women and girls has intensified. Quarantines and contact restrictions have particularly led to domestic violence. Freedom of movement was severely restricted and children cannot go to school. In addition, there is home office and existential problems. And let me look at the data from Germany. It says recorded. 3% of women in Germany were victims of physical violence during the period of strict contact restrictions in home. Another 3.6% were raped by their partner. Children were violently punished in 6.5 households. If women were in quarantine or all the families had financial worries, the numbers were significantly higher. And the same was true if one of the partner was on short-time work or lost their job due to the pandemic. In Turkey, NGO is saying that the number of women applying to the NGOs regarding the domestic violence increased 55%. And 60% of the women said that they were complained about physical and psychological violence. Unfortunately, home is not and was not a safe place for many of the women. Actually, we have an Istanbul Convention from 2014 for Europe, Germany, Turkey, and most of the European countries are part of this convention. This convention understands the violence as a form of gender-based discrimination, and it's a manifestation of historical unequal power relations between women and men. And importantly, it promotes the role of the private sector in preventing violence against women. And we have my colleague Andrea Franconi was there. We have ILO Convention 190. It also says in its preamble notes that domestic violence is something that has to be responded and recognized by the private sector. Moreover, we have employers as a duty of care. If they send to the employees to the home to work at the home office, isn't it then the workplace, this home? And we have to ask this too. This leads to my last topic, which my colleagues already said, and Professor Nawawish was already say, we're gonna talk about it. It's about the women and the home office. I want to actually, long before pandemic, it was 2019, March 2019, Hans Böckler Foundation, a foundation from Germany, shared their data about the home office. They found out that home office and flexible working hours can help to better master family and work, but parents often work even more and fall back to the classical role models. Mothers who work in the home office have 3 hours more childcare per week than mothers who cannot work from home. At the same time, they work an extra hour at work. Okay, the situation is different for fathers. They work more overtime in the home office, 2 more per week than fathers without homework, but do not take more time for children, even if they are working in the home. Let's have a look what happened during the pandemic. It's not so different. New York Times reported 50% of the men said they were doing the homeschooling. Only 3% of the women agreed to this. And according to data from Germany, 72% women said, due to the double load, I don't have time for breaks and regular rest periods. 51% men agreed. And look at the Turkey. This was a question for the Turkey. Was the domestic work division made with other family members, including men in the quarantine process? Was answer yes by 32% women, partially 33%, and 32% said no. Actually, as I said, it was not something new. The reasons the modern women feel themselves free and their work getting lighter was that performing, the transition of performing to coordinator, they transited from the performing to coordinator. Performing means cleaning, childcare, and others. Now we have institutions who are taking further, kindergarten, schools, and we have women, domestic workers, kindergarten educators, teachers who are doing this for us. It's coordinator, which is called also the mental load, but the women have been coordinating all of the things for a long time. But then the mechanisms, this performing mechanisms disappear with the COVID-19 crisis. The underlying system emerged with all its simplicity. When the family institution did not engage in any other institution, it was seen that the whole burden was placed on women in the family. The pandemic destroyed the illusion of the modern women. So let me finish up. In conclusion, let me sum up my points. I think the crisis highlighted the inequalities in the society. The ones who have been disadvantaged most suffered most from the crisis. Intersectional nature of the discrimination became more clear. The women in the informal economy didn't get the help they needed. And since the outbreak of the COVID-19, all types of violence increased, and the pandemic destroyed the illusion of the modern woman. I want to finish with one last sentence. To meet all the needs of the women in an unequally organized world of work environment through international and national labor law systems, for the realization of not only de jure, but also de facto equality between women and work in the world of work, new approaches are needed, which takes into account the specific needs of the women as a group and with respect to complex and intersectional nature of the discrimination phenomenon in our societies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Seren, and thanks again for sticking to the time. And now, without further ado, I am giving the floor to Dr. Kamila Nomowicz, who is an assistant professor at the University of Warsaw, Missouri in Poland. I hope I have pronounced that correctly. And she has a long experience as a trainer, also for various ministries in Poland. And she has a wide range of publication in the field of labor law and labor sciences, more in general. Kamila, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I know that this is the major problem with my surname and also the university city, that is always hard to be pronounced on international congresses. So you did a very good job with that.
Good.
I'm the last speaker today, so I will also want to thank all my colleagues that spoke before me for for being part of this event and for addressing many different issues connected with the female perspective in the world of work during and after COVID. Some of those aspects are, of course, also occurring in Poland, but as from the program that you see, the title of my presentation, I wanted to address one of the aspects that has been underlined by the pandemic period, which is the problem of work-life balance in general, but in details the hard task to combine the remote work and the childcare at the same time. The title of my presentation is a little provocative because I am putting a rhetorical question that I hope that will be answered during the discussion panel, and I really encourage every participant also to give their reflections, their opinions, and their experiences in this matter. A multitasking robot. I chose this rhetorical question to address the problem that is connected with remote work in Poland and the legislation that has been approved during and because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Remote work in Poland has been first regulated, which is can be seen as a milestone because it's really particular situation. We didn't have remote work regulated before COVID-19 legislation. So the first let's call it legal definition, the legal regulation of remote work has been introduced right now. And the legislation has been already introduced in the first acts in March, soon after the first cases of COVID-19 that occurred in Poland. So the reaction of the legislator was very fast, very, very rapid. And to give some introduction to the legislation, to make you have a little background what happened in Poland, that the remote work has been regulated as a possibility given to all the employees to send all their employers to remote work in a form of individual decision. And basically the employees couldn't refuse the remote work. And what has been shown by the first months of this experience, that as you might have already experienced in your countries, because all my previous speakers, my colleagues from different countries has already noticed that the problem with remote workers and childcare and in general work-life balance and household duties and all the different roles that women have was difficult to cope with different roles at the same time. If we considered that remote work and home office and whatever legal term we use for the same situation was combined in most of the countries also with the closure of all the schools, kindergartens, nurseries, and all the institutions that normally took the care of the children during the working hours. But not only the closing of those organizations, of schools, nurseries, etc., was the problem, but the fact that at the same time, and combining those roles was difficult for women. At the same time, we passed to remote work and remote education. So one aspect of the situation was the fact that women had to take care of the children, but the other fact was that not only taking care of the children was the problem, but also doing remote work and remote education. So what was the main issue connected with combining these roles. For example, the technical aspects, not only the time management that obviously was hard to cope with, but the technical aspect that the legislator seems to be forgetting, like, for example, the fact that a working parent could not refuse home office, because we of course we use the term home office because in the majority of cases the remote work was done from home, and even without the logistical possibilities to handle childcare and remote work at the same time, the first legal act that has been approved in the field of remote work didn't regulate the right to refuse remote work for parents. This problem has been seen by the legislator, and it has been addressed in the following amendments. And from 19th of June, we have a different regulation that, in the case of remote work, provides a right to refuse remote work in case there are no logistical possibilities, technical possibilities, or environment that allows the worker to do remote work from home. But still, it doesn't respond to the problems that have been addressed by some parents, some working parents that have to deal with the childcare and still remote education during remote work. From legal point of view, parents in Poland that are obliged to take care of children in case that nurseries, schools, and kindergartens are closed have right to a special care allowance. And this care allowance is, of course, from the Social Security system, and generally it is connected with financial support from the Social Security of 80% of the remuneration. But unfortunately, the general regulation that still hasn't been changed during the pandemic period provides this special care allowance only to parents that have to take care and have to resign from work obligations only for taking care of children under 8-year-old. So, as you have heard from previous speakers, from Maria Cristina De Goglio or from Andrea Franconi, in different parts of the world, in different countries, we have different limit of the age of the child that allows us to gain some advantages from the Social Security system, or to have special parental leaves or care allowance. In Poland, this age limit is at 8-year-old. So we can presume that from the point of view of the legislator, children that have more than 8 years can be independent from the point of view of the childcare and from the point of view of the remote education obligations that they still have to fulfill at the same time. So my female colleagues are smiling because, as you might imagine, having a 9-year-old at home is not that much different from an 8-year-old if you have to combine childcare and if you have to combine also the educational process that you have to be part of to of course let the child use the computer for the remote education, help him with the school tasks that have from one day to another became remote and digital too. So if we think that that a 9-year-old can manage and can cope with the digital platform, online education all by himself, of course, from the legislator point of view, there's a lack in the protection of parents that had to take care of children of more than 8 years. And these two problems are the one that I wanted to address in my presentation. Of course, these are not the only problems, because as all my previous speakers mentioned, the same issues considering women risks presented in the health and care jobs, or physical and mental harassment are also true in our reality. But as I mostly cope with in my research with platform work, digital work, and remote work in general, I chose those two questions to be addressed and to open the discussion. So to come to the conclusions, what we observed in Poland and what we are still coping with, because the legislation that had to that was the first answer to the COVID pandemic, of course, was very fast, very rapid, but unfortunately, it's not ideal, it's not perfect, and it still has a lot to the questions to be, of course, changed and addressed and resolved. And the general conclusion that I might leave you with, and I hope that will open space to the further discussion, is the fact that more or less the similar problems occur in every of our countries, and all our legislators had to address those questions, those issues, and chose different ways to do so. So I really hope to this seminar to be a part of, and just a small introduction to further comparative discussion in this field, also from scientific and practical point of view, because today we have also a lot of practitioners, a lot of representatives of different associations and organizations, and I really welcome also your realistic, practical opinions and problems that you might have witnessed or been part of, to follow up with our scientific discussion, because I think that the most important impact that we can leave and we can have from these seminars is that we have the opportunity to have the discussion between science and between scientific researchers and the practitioners and women, and not only women, of course, but also male practitioners that can also be an important part in our research, in our discussion, and in our outcomes of this topic that we chosen to be addressed. So thank you very much, and thank you very much, Valerio, that you have been with us today and that you have agreed to be our moderator. And I wanted to leave the floor and leave more time for our other participants that I really hope that will have also their insight and their part in this event, in this debate, because we didn't want to call it a traditional conference or seminar, because we wanted to create a space for debate. So I leave the floor for the debate now, and thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Camilla, again for this very interesting presentation. And now we have indeed some time for the debate. So I invite everyone to submit questions. You can write them in the chat. This will be the most practical way for us to read those questions if you want. And I think there's already one that I'm not sure who was. I think it can be taken by any one of the speakers, but then I leave it to you to decide who wants to answer. And it concerns practices such as discrimination and bullying and harassment and violence and harassment, which were already, of course, a very serious and widespread problem before the pandemic, but I think one person from the audience is asking if you think that this situation has brought to an increase in the instances of violences and harassment when they regard workers.
So I can come in. So first, thank you for that question. It's very interesting, and actually, yes, this is something that we are all seeing from different countries. This is a high level of incidents related with gender violence, which are all over the society, and of course are also in the world of work. And well, last year we negotiate Convention 190 because this situation was a main topic to discuss. It was proposed to be on the ILO agenda during 7 years on a road, but they didn't have the support enough in the commission in order to put it into the topic to deal in the ILO conference. So this convention is really important for us, since it is a new step to visualize a situation that was already a long-term situation rooted in the society. And in the world of work, it had many manifestations. And now with the COVID-19, everything seemed to be, as we said, and we mentioned many times during the expositions, this is exacerbated by this situation of crisis, of uncertainty, of continuing pressures, of not being allowed to exercise a right to disconnect, of the mental and psychological consequences that we are all suffering because of this state. So yes, this is a main problem, and well, I would also like to hear the opinion of my colleagues on this regard, but I think it's something that we as labor lawyers or labor researchers are called to attend nowadays, just to guarantee some minimal levels of respect, and of course to try to overcome this long-term situation that has affected us as a women group, right?
I would like to add something to this issue. Actually, I have read that women associations, social health associations, think that most probably this Juni, July, and the other months will be more women applying to help against violence, because they think that this restriction period, no one couldn't go anywhere, so they were stuck in the house and they couldn't go there. They didn't have a chance to contact with the other people, so most probably it will be more higher. It's already high and will be more higher in the next period. And moreover, and one more thing to add, sure, we haven't seen more applications and from the women in the last years. This has also affected national laws and international law, understanding the importance of the violence against women, and they are giving the opportunity to protect themselves against this. It's important. Women are more aware of their rights. That's wonderful, and thankfully states are more aware of the importance of this issue, I think. Thank you.
May I add something related to the Italy perspective? Among the interviews that has been done for produce the report that I mentioned before, one was related to the remote working or working from home. And in the list of the pro, the as well-known list pro and cons about situation, etc. On the pros, there were the fact that they, at least women, are not to face with harassment in the workplace. So the positive side of home working or remote working, with all this beside all the activities related to family care, etc., was that they have not to deal with harassment. And it's very sad, I have to say, that the pro is this one, is not the aim of the work office. It's not the aim of working from a remote space. And I think that the pandemic has stressed, or we can see that pandemic has been a stress test about the gender issues and harassment issue concerning the labor market and the working place. Thank you.
Perfect. So another question that we have, I think it's something that I also wanted to say, and Virginia is making it very clear. She says that basically we needed a pandemic in order to see how much women could be impacted by a crisis in labor and work conditions. But actually, we know, as a matter of fact, that the work of women is, even in normal times, impacted by many of the things that you describe, by a disproportionate spread of chores in the household. I would say also by the fact that women are disproportionately represented in forms of work that are excluded from major protection. So if we speak about standard forms of employment, we know that they have gaps in various employment, labor protection, social security protection, and this, of course, has an impact on women as they are overrepresented in these forms of work. So how much of this is new and how much of this is something that we should have foreseen, and what we can do at this moment?
Okay, maybe I will add some remarks to the topic that you put forward now. As also my colleagues mentioned before, I also agree with the fact that the pandemic period has shown us a lot of vulnerabilities in the labor market and has stressed out the weakest point and the weakest groups in the labor market that are not new. And it's not only the stress test, like Maria Cristina De Goli mentioned, but I think that it might also be treated for different groups, not only researchers, but I hope for politics and governments too, as a kind of morality test also, because the problem with gender discrimination, or the problem with migrants discrimination, or the most vulnerable groups in the labor market, these problems have occurred before pandemic period. And the pandemic has shown us that the situation might be even more difficult and more serious than we have thought it to be. And this is a chance, of course, also for different legislators to address more rapidly some most important questions still connected with gender discrimination that maybe hasn't been addressed enough in the previous years. And it also shows us that the work-life balance that we are discussing for years now is still more theoretical than practical realization of the idea of work-life balance that we have, and that the gender roles are still far from what we expect it to be if we consider even the latest European legislation in this matter. So I think that from legal point of view, there's still a lot to do, and from political point of view, we can think about how the the campaigns and the actions that have been taken so far has really functioned in this particular period, in this particular proof that we are experiencing right now, because pandemic might be a good proof for our legislations in the gender issues, but not only in the gender issues, because I don't want to. We are concentrating, of course, today in our research in the gender issues, but as Sarah and Kasim also mentioned, there are a lot of vulnerable groups and discriminated in the labor market too. So not to forget also about these questions. And thank you.
Well, I wanted to add something. First, thank you, Virginia, for your question. I think it's really on point, as Valerio said. So usually I think about this pandemic as a magnifying glasses, you know. The pathologies were already there. This is not something new for us. We have been dealing with these kind of situations over history, and the women's reivindication of their rights and the minimal levels of safety and health, especially in the world of work, is a topic that we have been trying to put in the agenda, in the global agenda for a long time, because obviously it's not something that happened with the pandemic, but with the pandemic and the situations that are imposed over the population because of it, generate this exacerbating role, this magnifying effect that we can see everything in many other levels. And sadly, what is going on, and we can see it all over the media, is how violence is increasing day by day. In Argentina, since the lockdown began, we have already 73 cases of femicides. And this is just something that is not something that's happening only in Argentina, all over Latin America, and also in different countries. In China, where the virus began, all these situations happened. And actually, in 2014, 2016, during the crisis that was generated by Ebola, this same situation was reported. So we were expecting this, because isolation situations generate these kinds of reactions. And when isolated people who are in a vulnerability situation, they don't have the resource to ask for help. They don't have a way to protect themselves from the aggressor. This happens not only at the different households, but also happens in different new environments that are now called the world of work, because I'm always going to talk about Argentina, of course, but you can join me on this one on your country. In Argentina, we have many resolutions from the labor minister, who has declared that the new place of work is the home, is the houses of the workers. So if this is the new environment where workers are supposed to work, shouldn't we protect them with the same guarantees? You know, shouldn't we give them the rights or the self-help measures that are already in our international standards? So I've been thinking about how this problematic should be resolved, not only by creating new legislation, but also giving a new meaning to that information and that legislation that already exists in our national and international standards. Thank you.
I want to emphasize something on this issue if we have time. I think the positive discrimination is a very important thing when we think about tackling this kind of problems. This is something which we already have, so we can it's in the international codes. It's in most of the European countries, anti-discrimination codes. So this is something which we can use, which is already existing. In my opinion, as I also said in my speech, on one side, we have to change our way of thinking, and we have to use new approaches. for example, we have used this in disabilities people with disabilities convention. This was a positive thing, and Istanbul Convention was also positive. We can make more conventions or change more conventions in this way, and also use the thing as a positive discrimination we already have to help the people, the oppressed groups and the minorities, in my opinion. Thank you.
I would like to add just a very quick point of view concerning the as have been already said by the other speaker. We have legislation about gender balance, or about the fact that it's not possible to discriminate concerning the gender, etc. But in my opinion, I think that it is necessary that female, together with male workers or part of the civil society, do something in concrete to attend these rules, or to implement in concreting these rules, because if the legislation stays on the paper, it's not possible, in my opinion, to change. So I think that would be a very good way to think about not only the situation now during the pandemic, but also think about the future and think about new instruments or tools or new aggregation between societies to implement the rules or the tools that they are already described in the legislation. And only, in my opinion, together is possible to obtain something. So male and female together. I'm not sure that only with the imposition of the obligation to do something is possible to obtain a real result. But it's my opinion concerning this very crucial and hot topic. Thank you.
Thank you all. So I think we have a very far-reaching question. You all have answered a little bit on this, but we have a very far-reaching question from Javier Alberto Suarez Astasios, and that he asked a very simple question: what is the most ideal way to end once and for all gender differences in the world of work? So again, we have seen that the pandemic has exacerbated trends and problems that we see in general in the labor market. But regardless of the pandemic, these problems will stay, and they were there before the pandemic. So in your concluding remarks, do you want to say something about it? What, in your opinion, is the way forward? And maybe you can also answer that so far your research has not come to a clear pathway on how to get rid of discrimination in the world of work, but I'm very curious to know what you think about it.
I can start. First of all, actually, yeah, when we understand from gender differences, we have to be clear what we understand from sex and gender. Sex as the woman, as a body, as a something, and man. And gender, you mean, first of all, do you mean the sociologically created understanding how a person in a human body should act? Do I understand it clear? Is it right, Javier? Do you mean the sociological thing? As we mean something sociological, I think we have a very long way to go. It's not something that we can decide today and we can solve tomorrow, because it's been more than 2000 years. Most of the societies that the gender differences are growing and growing, and modern society actually didn't help to tackle them. So first of all, we have to be aware of the question. Second, we have to re-educate our societies. And third, we have to restructure our societies. Without restructuring it, we can find a solution in this gender-structured way of thinking, in my opinion. Thank you for it.
Well, I agree with Adrian. Also, Javier, it seems to be an easy question, right? But it's not that easy to answer. Obviously, since we are in 2020 and we are still dealing with this, and usually when we teach this during classes, a student asks, should we be addressing this again now? Wasn't this supposed to be fixed? Like when the women's rights were recognized? And yes, the only answer that I can think of, this isn't an issue that concerns only to law, labor law, lawyers, researchers. This is an issue that is rooted between the social and cultural stereotypes and customs. This is why it's so hard to finally eliminate, because it doesn't depend only on one legislation. It depends on a change of the mind of men, women, and the whole society. And this is why I agree also with Maria Cristina. Our approach also for the event was a he for she perspective, because we feel that this is an issue that concerns us all. We all should be getting conscious about what kind of situation we shouldn't tolerate anymore. The zero tolerance principle, when it comes to regards to intersectionality of discriminations and discrimination, as well as systematic discrimination, is something that we all need to approach. So something that I said this in my presentation, is that we should have gender sensitive intersectional approach to the responses, at least to the COVID-19, and also to the problematic of gender in the society. The gender agenda and the gender issue is something that is transversal. It doesn't stay only in one field. It grows all over the different fields, and that's why we need to join forces together, because it won't go away just by saying it so. It requires an interdimensional and multidisciplinary approach. And of course, these kind of events and this kind of sensitive and to try to generate a different concepts in the society are different ways to approach the problem.
If I may add a few words to what Andrea Franconi just said. Of course, I agree completely with her, and your question, Javier, is not easy at all, because it's difficult to find an ideal solution if we are talking about an interdisciplinary, international, worldwide, 2,000-year-old problem that still hasn't been fixed. But one thing that comes to my mind is maybe I don't know the answer to the whole question, but I think that I know what's supposed to be the first step. And I truly believe that the first thing that needs to be done is to identify, address, and promote the knowledge about the problems that we still find that are not fixed. In my teaching experience, I also acknowledge that lots of my students have the same reaction as Andrea Franconi just mentioned, that if we are talking about gender discrimination, isn't something that was supposed to be fixed like 50 years ago? So is it still actual? Is it still true? Is it still happening in Europe, in like modern West societies? Because I'm not talking even worldwidely, but of course my students have the European experience and European background. So for them, the gender discrimination might not be an issue today. But unfortunately, COVID showed us that this is still an issue, and it's serious, and it's getting more serious in some aspects that it was 2 years ago. And I don't want to be pessimistic, but as you all said and as you all imagine, we will have another pandemic periods probably in the nearest future. So it is something that will happen again, and we have the opportunity to identify, address the questions that occur now, to have better responses when the situation will get worse again. And the first thing that I really believe that needs to be done is to gather our experience, to share our experience, to combine our researches, to compare the results and the opinions and the findings that we have, and to promote the knowledge about these issues. Because maybe now I am too optimistic, but I think that a little lobby from women in Poland also showed that in 3 months, the legislation on remote work has been changed. And now in the newest act on remote work, there is a right to refuse remote work if there is no technical possibility to work from home. So this is one little step, but maybe it was necessary to be done. And there are so many steps that can be done still that will put us to the ideal situation when maybe the gender differences won't count anymore. So thank you very much.
I would like just to conclude, because I agree with all of you about this topic and terms. And I would like just to conclude with a famous quote that it is that behind a great man, there is a great woman. Maybe I would like to change a little bit and say and add that behind a great woman, there is a great man. So in this way, it's possible to change and do the work better, our environment better day by day. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have arrived to the time limit for this meeting, and so we can wrap it up. Thank you so much to the speakers and organizers, of course, first of all, for organizing this excellent meeting and for their excellent presentations. I think the recording of this will be made available by them soon enough. Thank you so much also to all the people that attended the meeting and asked questions and participated in our discussion. And to the next time.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.